Town Band Banter with Doc and Dave. Every week, two longtime friends and colleagues in the world of music, David Price and Donald Doc Smith, get together to discuss the triumphs as well as the twists and turns of lifelong learning for the dedicated members of thousands of civilian community music ensembles of every shape and size. Your comments and suggestions are always welcomed through email as info@townbandbanter.com, Facebook, Town Band Banter, and Instagram, #TownBandBanter. And now for our hosts, Doc and Dave.
All right, Dave, here we go.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, season 2.
This is the 4,000th.
No.
No, I'm sorry.
Episode 9.
Ah.
We're almost into double digits. Yeah, you lost track because we did 2 last week.
Well, I'm older now. My brain doesn't work quite as well.
Oh,
This is
good.
the introduction.
Good point. Yeah, how wonderful. So our guest today is Dr. Julie Roth from Brown University and also the hospital.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Yeah,
Good to see
who
you.
also plays in this fabulous group that I can't wait to hear, which is the Brown, or is it the Providence Doctors?
The Providence Medical Orchestra.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I can't wait to hear that. But I think what would be helpful is just how did you end up? You know, you're an admired professor here at the university, and the person who got me to you said this is the neurologist to talk to, because I said who is a neurologist that also plays music. And he said, your name popped right up. That was it. So that was kind of cool. But how did this happen? You're still playing in an orchestra, but you're a very busy person during the day at the hospital and also at the university. So maybe just a thumbnail sketch of when you started bass.
Oh, so yeah, it's a little bit of a winding story, but I'll try to shorten it. So
That's great.
I did not start out as an orchestral player, which
Uh-huh.
I might have kind of hinted to you before, but I started playing bass when I was like 11 years old. I started an electric bass.
Ooh.
And I'd been playing violin and a little bit of piano before that, but I started on electric bass. I played mainly jazz, and then I started playing pretty much every genre outside of classical music.
Right, okay.
And I picked up
it.
upright when I was in high school.
Okay.
And
Where'd you go to high school?
in Connecticut, so
Okay.
outside of New York City. And I was
Right.
very lucky because I had a lot of jazz instructors there
Let me-
who were phenomenal.
Outside of New York City, where?
Darien, Connecticut.
Darien.
Oh, I know
Mhm.
Darien.
Because I went to school in Danbury. So.
Oh, you did, yeah.
For a while, and then they kicked me out. That's
kicked
a
you
long story, but that's all right. That's beside the point.
Yeah, no,
But,
we had this whole
yeah.
network of these wonderful music educators, actually, and a lot of
Yeah.
them had played with a lot of well-known people, and they were always bringing guest artists to the school, and so I had this great music education, and then I came to Brown for undergrad, and I ended up playing, I also did some, kid orchestra work, musical theater.
Right.
I played in an Afro-Latin jazz ensemble. I played folk music. I played in a swing band. I played in a hip-hop group. I played in a lot of groups.
Right.
Surf rock. So the list
Oh my
goes
gosh,
on, right?
yeah.
So then, probably 6 years ago, I heard this orchestra was starting. And
Oh, so it's new. I didn't know it was
like
new.
6
Yeah.
or 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And somebody asked me if I wanted to play, and I said, well, I really haven't bowed before outside of a pit orchestra,
Oh, right.
but at least I know how to read music. And
Right.
then since then, it has been a bit of a learning curve, but here
Sure.
I am.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Now, my sister, when she was going through medical school, talked about that. Everyone, all the way through an incredibly stressful period of time, had an outlet of some sort.
Yeah.
Some was music. One of her friends was a weightlifter.
Mm-hmm.
And he was way beyond the gym they had there, so they would go down and stand on the weights so that he'd have enough to. But
Yeah.
everyone had, some people were runners, some were bikes and stuff like that. But music was a pretty typical one, which is kind of cool. How many other people in your doctoral class, in your med class?
So at the time, we had about 80 people. There's a guy that I actually still play music with. Our families play together, and we have this
Oh,
kind
cool.
of family band. And I've been playing with him since med school for the last
Wow.
several decades.
Yeah.
And our families still get together and play music, which is great. Now the
Nice.
kids are involved. But that was definitely my outlet. And in a group of, about 80 people, I would say a good number of them actually were musicians.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many people are in the orchestra in this?
So the orchestra separately, again, I've been out of that school for a long time. It's a full orchestra, so right now I'm the only bass we're recruiting, but we had 3 basses, we had probably, 6 cellos. So just to kind of get you an idea, I
Yeah.
haven't counted it up, but
And the violins, like a 10 or so each part, or
Yep,
that
that's
many? Well, so
right,
that's
yeah.
pretty full.
Yeah,
You
it's
can do
pretty
really
full,
cool
yeah.
things. What about the winds? You know, because those are pretty
winds.
critical. It's one
They are.
person. Per,
Yeah, and they even will have to, there's kind of a wait list sometimes, as a clarinet, for example,
Yeah.
there's a wait list to get in just because,
Wow.
it's so popular. So they'll switch off on parts. So one clarinet, say 1 and 2, will play one piece, and then
Right.
they'll have another pair play another piece. So
Yeah, and I think
a
you
lot of
said
people involved.
they're not all doctors. It's medical profession. Some in the medical profession.
researchers,
But there's certainly enough
nurses.
people to do, like to do that, like you said.
Yeah.
It's
And then
cool.
how many, do you have a set number of concerts you do every year, or?
Yeah, we're doing about 3 concerts a year. So we did one in November, and then we have a concert coming up in early March
Yeah.
for Women's History Month. And
Yeah,
there's
definitely wanna
there'll be
know about
another
that.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
about that.
in May.
Cool. All right. So the reason I really wanted to talk to you is that I've noticed this my entire career about cognitive. I've been very into that my whole career as with students, but particularly now that I'm doing the Jamestown Community Band and community bands all along, I noticed that even though music kind of keeps people going, it's their meaning for life. We unfortunately lost 3 members of the Jamestown Band one year, and 2 out of 3 at the funerals, in lieu of flowers, make a donation to the. And when I talked to people at the wake, they said this is all he talked about. This is the most important thing. It was like, this is what kept him going, So, but by the same token, sometimes folks start losing where they are, cognitive abilities, oral abilities, like all of that. And so it's that balance between this is keeping them going and keeping all those things well, but it's also crossing it too. So I wanted to try to get into some of the neurology of all of that. Particularly the most common thing is that people will get off track, lost a measure early, come in a measure early or something, and they continue playing for a long period of time. Or just general thoughts about, because you do a course, probably not covering exactly this. I wouldn't want to take that test. But so that was really a broad question. So it's leaving it up to you to, I know you've thought about what you might want to say, but anything will do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is such an interesting challenge, and it's one interesting thing is that we didn't actually cover this topic in our course because we really focused on the joy that music brings to people,
Right.
the healing through music, both as a musician but also for people who are grieving. And so we've had sessions in our course on music as a form of therapy, when musicians have a neurological condition, like what happens when a stroke affects a musician's bowing hand, for example.
Right, yeah.
And we've covered a lot of that. We've talked about the healing power of certain pieces, even in treating neurological conditions like epilepsy, but somehow we left this out. What
Yeah.
do you do when it actually affects your
Because
brain?
epilepsy, your specialty,
specialist
really.
palsy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I think it's tough because there's so many aspects. There, pretty much you use every part of your brain to play music,
Right.
regardless of what kind of a musician you are. You're using like your motor systems, you're using your coordination areas, you're using your hearing and processing areas, visual, like really everything
Everything
comes
comes
together.
together.
And so I can mess up on a lot of pieces without having any cognitive problems. I'll tell you that much, right? I can have no problem
Right,
getting lost
yeah.
in the music.
Right.
But I think that when it becomes a bigger problem, there's a lot of reliance on other parts of the brain to kind of start chipping in and doing the heavy lifting.
Right,
And
yeah.
then I think it would be a question of like, how do you get those parts of the brain to step up and take over the parts that are really not.
Yeah, some of
That's
the,
strong.
there's the
If that
practicing,
makes
like,
sense.
because the more motor memory you have, muscle memory you
Yeah.
have, it just kind of gets you through that lick. But you just have to figure out when that lick is,
Right.
that's part of it. And familiarity, goes with anything. We had talked about, I compared language reading to music reading.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that, but if all of a sudden you're playing a piece and you haven't, it sounds like you have such a broad music background that you played in so many things, but someone else might be thrown. It's like all of a sudden it's a Latin piece.
Right.
And now we're playing the classical piece, which you kind of
Right.
avoided, so, but that's going to be harder. That's obviously going to be harder when you're out of that style, or if it's a style that's completely new to you, which is really cool. Then the brain is really going. I mean, for me, that really gets juices going. How do you feel about that?
I think that's totally what it is. I mean, for me, so I'm in a stage where I have to really actively work at certain aspects of playing music. There are things that are going to come easier to me. And I want to say, just for the record, as we age, I think we all lose some degree of cognitive function. It's much harder to learn a new thing, for example, but we get so much better at pattern recognition.
Right.
And
yeah.
so that motor memory you talked about actually gets solidified, and we are better at seeing a pattern in something than like a kid who's learning something for the first time.
Or then executive knowing, oh,
executive,
I have to
yeah.
start thinking about this more
Yeah,
because
like this is coming, and
I'm lost.
yeah, absolutely. And so it's a battle of kind of what you're learning and what you're trying not to lose, and then what you need to kind of pump up the volume on. I don't mean the volume of the song, but I really mean like what do you need to really
Well, how to
enlist the
prepare.
help of. Yeah, and so I find like if I'm playing, if I'm more tired, I'm going to be more likely to get lost,
Right,
tune
sure,
out,
yeah.
right? Get lost in the piece, or if I'm sick.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
No, but I don't know if that helps. And we could talk
Right.
about some of that too. My son, like a discussion about beta blockers. For the, we were just, I showed you a little bit of his audition.
Yeah.
And he recently discovered just about everyone uses it.
Yeah.
To get started, and then when I looked into it more, a lot of people I know are using that and that's not a cognitive thing, that's just
Right.
slowing down your adrenal system, right? Basically, just lowering your blood pressure and
Just
slowing
getting
things
over the
down.
hump.
So you think I'd be better at one? Because I've been taking those for years.
Oh, yeah, no. And what, you just take more and it's not making any better? No, that's...
I have just a very important question. I've been doing a little
Yeah.
research in order to get
Okay.
prepared for this.
All right.
No, all right. So it's morning. You wake
Uh-huh.
up. Okay, you wake up in the morning and you have 1-800 cars for kids. What? An earworm.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with them?
I'm very familiar.
Do you
with
get them a
earworms.
lot?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
all
constantly
the
getting
time.
those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this was just but I was so curious about it that what does a neurologist do about that? Do you have
Shutting it off.
Are you trying to get rid of the earworm or lean into
trying to
the
get
earworm?
rid of it?
Yeah. I think for me, I've learned that not everybody gets them, first of all. I think some of us who are a little more like prone to catchy tunes probably get them more, and I do tend to get them a lot. I think for me is I have to use a counter earworm. I have to listen to a song that I know is catchy to get the original song out of my head.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that works. I've had it even worse because I have a son who writes songs, but they're so catchy that I'll get his stupid song stuck in my
It's
head.
stuck in your brain. Yeah.
And I'll like be walking down the hall of the hospital singing his stupid little song in my head
Right.
and hoping I don't sing it out loud.
My wife talks about the fact that when we first married, I would whistle
Yeah.
the same song over and over again for the first 2 or 3 years. And it was very sad. Dun, ba, da, dun, ba, da, dun, 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 dun. And underneath there was a counter melody going dun, 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 dun. And of course I couldn't whistle both parts. So it was either one or the other. But she would say, "What is that you're whistling?" I said, "It's something I played somewhere, and it's stuck in my brain."
Oh, that's even
Just
worse if you don't know where it comes from.
Well, I do know where it came from, but it was in my brain for a long time and didn't really come out until that time. I don't know why. But anyway, that was a question I wanted to ask you as a
I don't know
neurologist.
why people get I will say,
Yes.
I don't know why people get earworms. There is something where the brain will actually create music, and it's a little different from an earworm, but you can have seizures that are actually musical seizures.
Right, yeah.
And I have seen patients with that, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had one who had Ave Maria stuck in her head, but it was a seizure. It was
It was
wacky. Yeah, exactly.
I got-
and then I was like, I love that tune.
And she was,
Let's not get
she was Jewish or, like, oh my.
I know. Oh no.
But,
Well,
but yeah, I was
similar-
like, why would I want to get rid of that beautiful song? But,
Similar
but
accounts
yeah.
I got at one of my favorite books was it Musicophilia?
Yes,
I
yes,
love that book,
it's a
and
great
Oliver
book.
Sacks, and he talks about that. There are people that have this. I was actually maybe Doc. You probably had a similar thing, but I was surprised as a kid growing up that other people don't have music in their head all the time, and that was something from being a very small child. There was always music. And whatever you played as a game or anything like that, or there was background music. Dun, 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 dun. You're on your sled. Dun, 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 dun. there was a lot of aspects like that was all, and I was really surprised to find out not everybody has that. Not everybody does that.
Wow.
You know.
Is it more common once dementia and all of that starts setting in? No, but people that.
Wait a minute.
No, I'm not.
I
Not
know.
for you. No, but it made me think that just lifelong. We started at the kids, but
Yeah.
lifelong, there are people that can't remember any name of anyone in their family or what they had for lunch, but yet they'll sing 5 verses of a song they knew as a child.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The last things to go are the most important things, breathing and everything else, and music, which is the first thing to go when they're doing budget cuts. But the last thing to go, is that true? Is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, with memory, we file different memories in
Right.
different space, and there's actually, maybe there's more shelf space in the music area, I'm not sure, but we are filing these memories differently. And so
Right.
there are even people who have had a stroke that leaves them unable to talk, and I think this was in musicophilia,
Yeah.
but they can sing. And we do this actually on the wards, they can't get a word out, but we'll
Right.
have them sing something very familiar like Happy Birthday, and they can
Right,
sing
right.
Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
And so it's just where it's filed in we say the non-dominant hemisphere, to use some jargon.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
but I think you're probably right that when it's something that's very important, it's just where it's filed in the brain.
I
But
started
it's
working-
cool that it knows that it's
It
that
knows
important.
that you can
Right
grab
up
it
front.
from it.
And that seems to be across, people that aren't even musical. People
Yeah.
that didn't even sing well,
Yeah.
they still have that memory of, and the lyrics too. So there's
The
something
lyrics.
to do with the language as well, mixed in there.
I was doing programs with assisted living and memory care, and that's one of the first things that just floored me. There were people there that couldn't put a sentence together, and then all of a sudden they're singing along,
Yeah.
with songs that they remember. The brain is just absolutely incredible
great.
that way. Yeah. I have one quick thing I want to ask you. There we go. You ready?
You already asked
Anatomists
one.
today would be hard put to identify. This is from the studies of Nina Kraus, whoever that is. I'm not sure, but hard pressed to identify the brain of a visual artist, a writer, or a mathematician. But they could recognize the brain of a professional musician without a moment's hesitation.
I have not heard that. I'm curious
I was
based
I was
on
curious
what.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any just studies of just looking at the brains or
Sure,
looking
yeah.
at the MRIs. There are these functional MRI studies of musicians
Yeah.
that were being done probably in the mid 2000s.
Right.
And I worked with a guy who was doing a lot of them. And the way that professional musicians were filing music was a little different from people who were not trained in music. And it was very interesting because when you're reading musical notation or when you're conducting or you're using a lot of code, right? Like when I played in the orchestra, I had to learn, I'm embarrassed to say, but words like sostenuto.
Oh yeah, right. No, I've forgotten a lot of those terms. They come
What
up
is
again.
that?
But
What is that
again?
swinging again? I know piano and forte. but
Right,
this
yeah,
word.
yeah.
So these are really words that stand in for they're symbolic interpretations, and so a lot of musicians have a lot of information filed in these symbolic areas of the brain, which are kind of like up here,
Sure.
your angular.
And sometimes not even in language.
Yeah,
they
they're
know that.
weirdly in an area that's near language, but we're
Right,
reading
yeah.
notes the way that we might read like a foreign language.
Yeah.
And yet the meaning of the words or the meaning of the music is
Right.
filed in a different place.
Right.
So people who are kind of just listening to a beautiful song but have never had any professional training or anything and don't know the notes
Yeah.
are listening to music one way, and then the people who are having the music training. So
Right.
maybe that's what was meant. I'm not really
Maybe,
sure.
yeah,
But,
I was curious
yeah,
because I
it
didn't
is- it's a
think
curious thing.
that there was any
Yeah.
physical differences.
Yeah.
Usually, they take a look. Well, it's the brain of a crazy guy. This is a normal guy. They all look the same. You
And
know
a
what I mean?
crazy
So-
musician.
Yeah, right. The
But they're
musician
physical.
has a lump on the side or something.
For certain skills, there's certain synaptic connections that
Yeah.
are made and permanent, pretty
Yeah.
much permanent, as long as
Yeah.
you're using them occasionally.
Yeah.
Well, but we're looking for solutions for these for people who get lost.
Oh, yeah, right,
and which
yeah,
we're not
yeah.
going to get today. We're not going to get to
Yeah.
today, but it might be a good way to start thinking about
Yeah.
it. Because we talked as we're coming in sight reading. So the solution for sight reading, how do you become a better sight reader? Sight reading more. That doesn't necessarily solve it if you're
Right.
lousy at it. But I think almost everyone can agree that some days they sight read better than other days. So they're not a good or a bad sight reader overall. It's just something is going on in processing that day that is not working out what is it, so that you could turn that around. And that's what I'm really seeking, that answer, to help that person raise their awareness that they're lost. And in sight reading, help them, or help them practice too, to start building up. How do I prevent that from happening? I had 4 people this last concert ask me, how do you practice? I don't know how to practice. And I thought about, that's something I'd worked into my school. When I do the school orchestra or band, I always had that as part of the curriculum, like early in the year. Here's how you do this. And I hadn't been doing that with the adult band, so we started doing that.
That'd be something that really to address. Just sit down with a group and say, look, everybody's going to have their own techniques, but let's try some techniques, or let's discuss some techniques that might really work for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on that? Like that was a big package. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's too big of a
just sort
package.
of try to unpack that a little bit. So, if I knew how to be a great sight reader, I would be a great sight reader, number one, and I'm not. But however, I think that getting back to these ideas of these cognitive domains and different parts of the brain doing different things, we need to kind of take a lesson from other fields. Like there was this important study that came out in December about taxi drivers being less at risk for Alzheimer's disease because their memory centers, no joke, are so thick and plump from having to memorize all the streets. In London, there was this study that came out 25 years ago, of these London cabbies where they have to take this elaborate test and they have to memorize thousands of streets and then they take a test on it.
Even with GPS now.
So that's what I'm saying now with GPS, we're all turning to GPS and our memory centers are shrinking because we're relying on GPS.
We were just talking about that.
On the way up here.
Right, so then you have to practice getting to know your way around. I know that's not music, but we have to practice being purposeful about finding our way around early so that we don't lose it later, because those taxi drivers, where they know their way around without the GPS, not only Uber, taxi, they get around the city and they know where everything is because they remember it.
Yeah.
So they have a farther to fall, right?
Decision making.
Right. So it's if you practice that, you're practicing early on. So with maybe the sight reading, you come up with a system. I don't know what the system is because I haven't figured it out yet, but you come up with a system that's working, and then that's the thing that you practice early. Right. But then the other cognitive domains that have to fit into place, I would say the biggest one is attention. And attention is kind of how your frontal lobes are working, which is tied in with executive function, which can go. But if your level of alertness and attention is intact, you're awake, and we were joking about the Red Bull, I can't do the Red Bull, but I have to have my single cup of coffee, I have to be well rested.
Yeah.
But by the end of my rehearsal, if it's 9 o'clock, I'm so sleepy. I've had a long day at the hospital, I'm starting to fade, that's when I'm making the mistakes. So it's a timing thing.
So as a director, what we do is we yell at you, and then that really helps. That doesn't help at all.
And we need to point at you and say, you need to practice more.
So that kind of gets us into what I...
Look at the mental sharpness. It might be a timing thing. It might be that you just, the director prioritizes the more detailed work early in the rehearsal. Or, if it's a late rehearsal. There are little nuanced things that you can do, both as the musician on that side, probably as a director too. I'm just thinking, since I'm not in that role. But I think harnessing your attention to try to get your other circuits to work would be probably what I would do.
Yeah. That goes right into the study I was hinting that. So one of our previous guests, Dr. Orrin Richard Bundy, the Blue Band building is named after him. But he's such a humble guy. His study was right before mine. So I was involved in that because I wanted to go through the process kind of with him too, and I wanted to help him. And what he did is he compared, when are you more likely to notice mistakes, when you're just listening or when you're actually playing? And that's what he did. So he set up the study that people make a recording of something in their sight reading, right? And then right after they play it, they'd have to do a survey about what mistakes they made. Then they come back a week or so later, and they listen to a couple people playing the same song. One of them would be them playing that song. And then he really only used the one that was them, and compared whether they noticed more mistakes when they had just played or when they were just listening and focusing on listening. What do you think? How do you think that turned out?
I would assume they would figure it out when they're listening, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was the hype, and that's what he thought too. And much like my study, it came out differently than he did, and that makes it better. It's not a disaster. It came out significantly that it was when you were actually playing. because you have more things going
You're
on.
in it, yeah.
Yeah, you're more, you have the kinesthetic, you have everything else, see, I missed that fingering, or whatever. So it was pretty, I shouldn't say heavily, it was like just beyond significant
Yeah.
difference. But it was within significant difference that it was the people who were actually playing were more aware, which is kind of cool, which is not what happens with the problem that I'm talking about, because they've lost that awareness.
Yeah,
Because of the probably processing speed.
probably processing speed, yeah. for
So
sure.
my study was how to improve, at the end of it was, okay, all we have to do is increase processing speed. Okay, so how do we do that?
Might not be
There,
able to
and
do
Red
that.
Bull is not the answer to that
Yeah.
either.
Well, the other thing too is that I think we can all accept the fact that as we get older, there are therapies that we have to deal with. And I think it need to make it clear maybe to some of the older musicians who work and say, look, you might be used as a younger musician, you might be used to practicing just a couple times a week and you get it like that. But in a kind of a therapeutic sense, as you're older, you're going to need to put a little more therapeutic time into it, in order to make things work correctly. All right, and as I said, we're very open to stuff. Yeah, you need to take more vitamins for this, that, and the other for things physical. Well, for the brain, you're going to need to be able to, you're going to need to be able to put some time in a certain way. And that would be the tactic behind that, how you explain it as best you can and lay it out maybe. Even say, hey, on this day you work on these things, on this day you work on these things. But it's the frequency more that will.
His wife practices more than anyone I know.
Yes.
On
Is that
flute. She's
right?
trying to catch up,
Yeah.
and she really has
Yeah.
done that.
Well, in
Yeah.
quick, very quick explanation, we had a few years ago, we're both musicians, but a few years ago we decided that we got to get out of the house more. And there was a local community band that was saying, well, we'll start like kind of a beginner band. And anybody that wants to come, so I started French horn, she started flute, she had a little experience, but she started playing flute. And so we've been tackling these things. My wife is a good musician and she is a wonderful practicer. She knows how to practice. She's a mechanic. She just is, and she'll work things. I, on the other hand, am not as gifted that way, especially on the French horn. I have all the respect in the world for brass players now. I directed bands and did good, I
Funny,
just
I
did
haven't
not
built any more
understand.
respect for percussionists,
I
but
know.
that's just how
I'm
it
a
goes.
percussionist. Percussionist. So,
Drummer.
but anyway, a great challenge. But again, great from my brain. Yeah, I recognize that. It's also great for me physically. I always feel energized after I play the French horn. I feel oxygenated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my brain is working like
So
this,
when do you practice? I mean, you're such a busy person that
Yeah.
if you want something done, give it to a busy person, which is absolutely true.
Yeah, right.
But when you need to find a gap in between that is going to be helpful to you for
Yeah.
that day too, right? An escape.
Yeah, and hence the sight reading, because if you can't practice, then you are sight reading, which
Yes.
is not good for me.
Uh-huh.
It is literally when I can. So I was on call recently, and so I had to walk into a rehearsal, essentially sight reading, which is not ideal for me.
Yeah.
But
And you're the only bass. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
That's not
that
good.
was
Yeah.
like my nightmare. I hope
No.
our conductor isn't listening. He's so wonderful and so kind.
Right.
But I was like so embarrassed. But yeah, and then complicating. So a good thing is that my kids play instruments. A bad
Right.
thing is they're also all practicing, and we don't have infinite practice rooms.
Oh, okay,
It's a
right.
challenge, yes.
So-
What instruments do they play?
So we have one of my sons plays piano and is practicing for this chamber music performance. So he's like practicing hours and hours a day.
Wow.
Another one is practicing guitar and trombone in the basement.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not going to lug the bass upstairs.
Well, that's the other issue with bass. You can't
So-
bring them with you. You know?
Yeah, so I have to
you
kind
put
of
it in
wait
your
till it's
pocket.
quiet, but not too late at night, so as to upset the neighbors. So I think also the noise. If you're a percussionist, you know that well.
Yes,
There's
right.
sort of hours.
Well, the acoustic
Trombone
bass
and
doesn't
bass.
carry through things, and people don't seem to mind that lower. You don't
Okay,
disturb
so
too many neighbors with
After a
acoustic
might
certain
make
bass.
the
time or
dogs
two,
howl.
like,
Electric bass, absolutely.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
when you're doing a slap things, and
Yeah.
I could just see you doing that too.
So I think my ideal would be that I could practice regularly every day, but you're
Yeah.
taking it out of the case. There's a lot of baggage with that. So in an ideal world, it would be a little every day. But right now, it's if I have a block of time and the house nobody's studying for midterms.
Right,
And
right, yeah, right.
practicing their own
goodness.
instruments, that's when I
Wow, how
practice.
many excuses are there not to practice? Oh my
I know,
gosh,
so many.
unlimited, yeah,
Yeah.
almost unlimited. I'm very good at
Yeah,
that.
I'm real good at that.
Finding reasons not to practice,
Yeah.
and mostly because I've gotten away with not practicing.
Yeah.
So I challenged myself in this concert to do a really hard piece and play for the band, play in front of the band. And I hope I set it up right for them, because they asked, how do we practice? And I'm thinking, I'm not very good at that either, but here's what I've told everyone all along, and when I really do need to learn something, this is what I do, so I better find something that I really do need to learn. So I'm doing that with them and trying to live through that with them a little bit.
Now, when you
I feel so
retire,
much healthier when you do
Yeah.
that. Like when I played something more challenging in this orchestra, I always feel so much better having done well on the piece by the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah,
the season
Right.
than if I knew how to play it from the get-go.
Well, we talk about that, no matter how bad the rehearsal goes, I kind of get energized by the whole
Yeah.
thing. You know, like I'm more energy than when I started.
Yeah.
And what time do you rehearse? Is it in the evening?
So it's like from 7 to 9:15
Yeah,
at
right,
night,
yeah.
and then there are these very young people in the orchestra, and then they're going out at 9, like you're gonna start your studying, and my bedtime's like 9. You know,
is it?
so
Oh, good for you.
I'm like,
Well, because
usually,
you're up at 4 or 5, right?
earlier.
Oh, no,
So I went
really?
to
Oh,
sleep,
good
but
for you.
like 6:30. But
Yeah, right.
I'm a sleeper. So yeah, but I think it's just different people have different hours. So
Yeah.
when I'm sharpest. it's
the
usually
other
in
the other
morning.
problem is when you retire, you have this little conversation saying, yeah, I really should practice, but it's my nap time. It's, okay, I'll just go down for about 45 minutes. And,
Yeah, the most important meeting is not the one with the dean, it's with the nap.
It's the nap.
It's with the
Oh,
dean instead
the
of,
nap
I
thing
do,
is-
I do like that so much more, because
Oh,
I tend to get something done,
Absolutely.
Well, we always ask questions of our guests,
Yeah.
we've covered it, I think, as much as we can, but I would love to come back sometime and do more detail, we set a topic and try to all, look into that and try to come up with a solution, and that would be
But
wonderful.
our brains are all over the place.
Right,
and
yeah, right.
obviously, we don't know what to do.
So here we go. The first question we ask everyone is, what was your most memorable experience with the community music ensemble?
So you told me this in advance, and I narrowed it down to 2.
Okay.
All right.
That's
One
good.
was with the Providence Medical Orchestra, and it was
Okay.
actually this past season.
Oh, cool.
So we played Beethoven's Seventh in our orchestra concert,
Right.
and this was a piece that I'd liked since I was a kid. So
Wow.
even though I didn't really play classical music, I used to listen to all the Beethoven symphonies on cassette
Right.
over and over and over
What's a
again.
cassette? Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, right?
No.
So I'm not really sure, but I like the Sony headphones and the cassette player. And then I would just, at first it was all the pieces, and then it was just the seventh. And so this was like a piece that was particularly meaningful to me.
Right.
And as a bass player, as I think in an orchestra you have a particular role, but in every other type of music, you're the rhythm section.
Right.
And so I had this history of bass as a rhythm section instrument, and
But you control
this-
time and harmony.
in every other
Yeah,
thing. In orchestra, you don't.
No.
I mean, your conductor controls the time.
You play different
But
roles.
You play different roles, but the seventh, I think the reason I love this piece so much is because it's so rhythmic, and I just love rhythms so
Right.
much. So that was it was just so satisfying, and I think everybody was really, it was like very emotional experience because
Yeah.
it was such a great piece.
Uh-huh.
But the other, I think probably just above that was playing with this family band that I play with, and we played. It became an intergenerational band within the last few years. So
Right.
it's like 4 adults and 3 of our kids, and we all play music together. And we played on our porch for PVD Porch Fest
Oh,
this
cool.
past year.
Oh, okay.
And because of the location of our house and where we live in relation to like one of the Porch Fest organizers, we were like a big hub for Porch Fest. So
Oh,
we had
cool.
like hundreds and hundreds of people watching our family band.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
We were
neat.
playing fiddle music and
Yeah.
bluegrass and gypsy jazz. And
I was gonna say, what
was great.
kind of music
yeah,
you
so
play?
we played
Yeah.
like
that
minor
sounds
swing,
wonderful. Yeah.
Django
Yeah.
Reinhardt, and we played.
Oh, wow.
No, was he for record? We played St. Anne's Reel, which
Uh-huh.
is a fiddle tune. We
Yeah.
played this bluegrass song called Long I Ride. So we played a little set. But it was cool to see, people are dancing to our
That's-
family band.
Oh, that's
Of all,
nice.
so that was
Oh,
just
that's
really
great.
That has
great.
become a big part of
Yeah.
a thread that's through all of our episodes. It's a multi-generational
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
You can't talk to mom and dad in the same way when you're playing music.
Mm-hmm.
Language just leaves it short. there's a lot of things you could cover, emotionally and everything else and support. So that's wonderful.
That's very good.
Yeah. What was a big challenge with an ensemble and how was it overcome?
I mean, there have been a lot of challenges. I think that for me, it has been learning the language of both Italian, sometimes a little French, and I even studied some French, but I still have to relearn it.
Je ne
Bowing,
parle pas
a lot
français.
of, yeah, exactly. So, but learning to bow, learning some techniques. My technique is not that great, but just getting the sound and then just really coordinating, like the listening to the people around me and. So it's been challenging but rewarding. It hasn't been, I think I'm doing it because it's a hard thing as opposed to shying away from that.
Yeah, I think that's, we all tend to, find something that challenges us because that keeps everything going. That really does it.
It really does.
Yeah. Whether you conquer it or not, but it's just, my son just ran, the older son ran a 50-mile race. And a 68-year-old woman came in, just before him. I was like, she'd kick your butt, man. It was it was just a range. The weird part about that was my wife noticed, she said, people came across that finish line in much better shape than a marathon. The people, it's just a different set of people, and their expectations and how they go about it and everything else. Because the marathon people were just dropping, and everything else. And these people came across and they went for the free massage and stuff like that. But it was a whole different thing. So, but challenging. My son does it because he goes, I want to do things that are hard, that I didn't think I could do, and keep challenging myself for that. So that's kind of cool.
For sure.
So the last one is always yours for future.
Well, we talk about with the bands. What do you think the future of the community band concept,
and orchestra,
community orchestra and band and musical groups? And I think that probably the biggest concern is that as we get artificial intelligence out there and everything is so provided that it's so easy to have music and not necessarily make it. But is there, do you see a future in it?
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't say I've been involved long enough in more formal arrangements. Like the PMO I've only been in for 6 years, and I've been doing more of this, these smaller ensembles.
Sure.
But having kids who are two 16-year-olds and a 12-year-old, and seeing what the trends are, I think a lot of younger people are rejecting this AI stuff, and they're really going back to like the roots and making music and trying to come together. And so I think that I'm very optimistic about community bands.
That's good.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think this is is the future to me. But I might be missing something big because I haven't seen this for a long enough period of time. But
well, you're talking about a large musical ensemble which formed 6 years ago, which there's this little thing called a pandemic. Shortly after it started,
I know.
Like even things that have been running for decades before died.
Yep.
Because of that, there's something about that we're finding another thread is that because of COVID, people are more drawn to getting together.
They want to do real things, analog stuff. They don't want to be. So when the pandemic hit and we're a medical orchestra, so a lot of us are working in the hospitals. We're seeing COVID patients.
Right.
They formed this national medical virtual orchestra. I actually didn't play in it because I don't need to hear myself play at all. I'm no interest in recording myself by myself.
Recording yourself is
I'm
the
just
issue. That's hard for
I'm
people
like, where's
to do.
the fun in this? I'm not listening to the cellos in front of me and all that. That's what I love about playing this orchestra is hearing everybody else play. I like when I have a bunch of rest and I can listen to everybody. So, but then when it started getting back together and meeting in person, we did an outdoor session with everyone outside with masks and just read through some music, and it was just beautiful, you know? And so there was kind of a reclaiming of this is what it is, and I think a lot of people kind of doubled down on this is where I'm supposed to be, this is what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely became even more involved. At that point, I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's an orchestra, I don't know how long I'm going to do it. And then after the pandemic was sort of fizzling away, I was like, this is what I need to be doing, so I think
Are you a founding member?
I was one of the founding members,
Wow,
yeah.
how
I'm
cool
not
is that?
in the leadership board, but
No, yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. This is a wonderful
Good
visit.
job. Nice.
Yeah, I can't remember anything we talked about, but it was no.
Put it on
We
there
do
as
have-
a shot.
all I have to do is check the tape, and it'll come right back to me, I'm sure.
Yeah, guys, practice, get out of your comfort zone, do something new.
All right, so hopefully let's try to get together again sometime, and
Okay.
let's try to pick a topic, and it could be your idea. You know, like I love that, something that would interest
I
you
know,
would
we'll
be
sit and
great.
jam. I'll
Yeah.
just bring a Sandra and some brushes. You bring your horn, play the
Right.
bass. We'll play a little something.
Perfect.
And then,
I can
Yeah.
play lots of different things,
Yeah,
badly.
that's
You know?
Yeah, me too.
Right, that's it. So we always end our episodes with the same thing.
There we go.
Just keep on playing.